So this is episode 1, right?
Episode 1
of Filled with the Spirit.
Filled with the Spirit.
And I brought today a couple of Andalusia whiskeys. So this is a special barrel select by the Clear Lake Scotch and Bourbon Society. So this was Andalusia's triple distilled single malt whiskey that has been aged for 3 years in an ex-maple syrup barrel.
That's weird. Maple syrup. I'm excited.
I've had this before, and so the reason I brought it is because I like it. And that's just what Andalusia. Why don't you describe it? You've got
Andalusia triple distilled single malt whiskey. So it's essentially the same thing, but not in the maple barrels.
That's the way I read it. In fact, I would even say that flavor-wise, that's probably the way it works out. So.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. So basically, we're trying one with maple and one without.
Yeah, something like that. So which one you want to try
For
first?
the camera to see. It's beautiful.
By the way, this would be the point in the podcast where we could say, hey, we're always looking for a whiskey sponsor.
That's right. So if you want to give us some whiskey.
That's right. If you want us to talk about it and then talk about God, Jesus et al., feel free to hook us up in the DM.
And if you give it to us for free, we promise we'll not say bad things. We'll say it's amazing.
That's right.
That's not how this works. Not sponsored by Andalusia, but let's try it. Let's try the first one. So this is the non-maple.
Yeah. So I think they call it their Texas single malt. And so American single malt whiskey has just recently been approved as an official category.
And so what is the Stranahan's is a big one of those single malts, American single malts.
Yeah, Balcones is one of the biggest ones.
Okay.
Westland. I mean, they're starting to crop up everywhere. It
smells a little bit like a single malt from Texas. That's what my nose is. That's what my nose is getting.
I really tend to enjoy single malts. I like the graininess of them. That malted barley is something I really enjoy.
Yeah, that's a solid. Nothing crazy happening flavor-wise. But just a good run-of-the-mill kind of. It's pretty heavy on the. I guess the weediness is what I'm getting. Maybe not weediness, but I guess that's the barley probably.
Yeah,
I
call it
maltiness. Maltiness, yeah. The stuff you would make bread with, I guess, is the official whiskey term.
There you go. Jason's really good at giving tasting notes, so I kind of rely on him. I do taste maltiness in there, maybe a hint of vanilla flavor.
What's the proof on that? 85 maybe? 80? 50%.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot stronger than it.
And so actually we were talking about the differences. This one is actually 57% ABV.
Wow. Okay.
So but the irony is I think you'll find you taste the alcohol by volume more than you will. It's hard to say. I really like this. I've already gone through a whole bottle at my house. So
all right. Yeah, a lot of times that higher ABV tends to give you it's not spicier, right?
Right.
But the more of the tongue, the hotness, which is like. So people who don't drink whiskey and they try something like, oh, it's really smooth, and that what they mean is it's not burning, so it means it's probably just a lower alcohol content, that was more smooth. that didn't get me as I was caught off guard when it was that high. It's good flavor.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I find that nowadays the higher the proof with more flavor and less of the burn, to me signifies a really good whiskey. I mean, it's just what I enjoy drinking, so.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to try to get some more flavor notes that sound official on that. A hint of vanilla, yeah, I think I get that too. But it may just because you said it. A lot of tasting notes are what you've either had recently or what comes to mind.
Taste is so weird. It all depends on what you ate for dinner.
Yep.
What the last drink you had before you came in here. It is why I like to chase. I like to chase my whiskey with water a lot. Mm-hmm. Because I really want to taste the whiskey, not all the stuff I had like 30 minutes ago. What do you think?
Yeah, That's good. How much does a bottle of that run on average?
I want to say it was like 45.
So that's not bad at all for $45. That's a good. There's no bad flavors happening there. So
Yeah,
I'm
no,
pleased.
I agree. Like, I would feel really good with that price point for that bottle every day. I'd not be going, oh, I way overpaid, and I might be going, wow, I've had more expensive whiskeys I haven't enjoyed as much. So yeah, it's pretty good. I'm gonna
Do a little rinse and try the next
yeah,
one.
just a smidgen. It's just kind of the
Get my fancy cup for my rinse.
it's just the way to make sure I'm not carrying over flavors. So, and Andalusia has another whiskey that I like. They have one. It's called Striker, and it is a single malt, but it is made. Here, you want to pass your glass? Sir. It is made with malt that has been smoked with, like, Texas barbecue woods.
I did try that one. Yeah,
Yes.
that was fun.
So it reminds you a lot of like brisket or something, because you can taste that smokiness in it.
From that Texas wood.
Yeah.
So this is noticeably darker, which I guess is because maple.
Yeah. Sorry, I may have poured a little more for myself than for you. If I did, feel free to.
Very rude. But what are you going to do? Yeah, that's sweeter, darker smell, I would say.
It has a really malty finish that I really like.
Yeah.
It's almost like if you had a sugary cereal, like Sugar Smacks in the morning, that kind of aftertaste of the grain and the
molasses,
and the
sugar,
yeah, all
yeah.
that.
It's a lot. So I would use the word smooth for this, but not in the way that people typically use smooth when just describing whiskey. It's a thicker, kind of velvety mouthfeel, you know.
That's a good way to say it.
Yeah. So you're right. You said that's
It's 57%
57%.
so that's 114 proof.
and the other was 100.
100 proof. So it's significantly higher alcohol content.
But
and
it
yet,
is softer on the edges.
Yeah, it's almost like you could drink a lot more of this and never realize you're getting more alcohol
Yep.
per sip, because it just doesn't present that way with that kind of heat that we talked about a minute ago.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's way softer on the edges.
Yeah, I think the maple syrup barrel kind of it must have done that for it. Adding that sugar afterwards, just kind of, or as it soaked into the barrel and then soaked back out. I'm not sure.
So
I like it a lot.
Is maple syrup usually barreled? Like, so why did they have a barrel that had maple syrup at one point that then had this whiskey in it?
I mean, I don't know. I guess we would have to talk to someone from Andalusia to
Fair
find
enough.
that out.
Where is Andalusia? It says Blanco?
Blanco,
It looks
yep.
like? Okay.
Blanco, Texas.
So people outside of Texas, since we do have a worldwide audience, we're assuming, probably don't have access to this. Is that correct?
Hard to say. I don't know how much Andalusia has spread. I know that there's a Houston distillery, Yellow Rose.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually visited that distillery. And when I went on a tour, they were telling me that some of their bigger clients are actually overseas, because they actually mostly distill bourbon. But Texas bourbon is a big seller overseas. I don't know that Texas single malts are.
Yeah,
but
not yet.
But there's a potential for them to have an audience outside of Texas, especially as the American single malt becomes a more robust category. Yeah. I can see, just like we're after the Westland stuff that's grown in the Northeast.
Yeah,
they have to be as equally intrigued about what we're doing down here, especially because Balcones was one of the.
They've been around for a minute. Yeah,
and they're one of the spearheads. I think they came out with they were calling it a Texas single malt, a long time ago. So,
yeah.
I really don't know. I know you can find it in liquor stores all around town. So
if you could only have one of those again, would you stick with the maple?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. It's good.
It's just real. I mean, just the single malt is a great little daily drinker.
And I'm assuming the maple was probably closer to $60-$70.
Yeah, it was $60.
Okay, that's not a whole lot more for having been sitting in a barrel that they had to buy from someone.
No, it's not.
Yeah,
and around the Clear Lake area, so I stopped in yesterday at a liquor store that is, so it's south of Santa Fe off of 45, and they had a bunch. So I was very enthused that they had a bunch because when you find like a unique bottle, you're sometimes afraid they're going to run out before you get as much as you want. So.
Well, yeah, and that was a special one, obviously. I mean, it was the maple, but it's also from the Clear Lake Scotch and Bourbon Society.
Yep.
They have a cool sticker on there, so that's bonus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
Stickers are a big deal in the in the bourbon societies. It's a big deal. I'm in American single malts. Maybe stickers are going to be the next thing.
Maybe.
So,
I mean, I know special barrels. Because so big distilleries, they have a flavor profile they want to hit, right?
Yep.
But if you're getting a barrel pick, that barrel pick has not been mixed to fit that flavor profile. So you're getting something that's unique.
Yep. You will never get the exact same thing that you got from that one barrel. Yep.
And so, so it's kind of cool. And so if you find a barrel pick that you like, you just latch on to it.
Yep.
Like there was a Westland barrel pick that I had.
Oh yeah,
and
I remember that. I was at another store and I saw one that was the same label, but it was a different batch number or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so I freaked out. I thought it was the same one, and I was like, "Hey, what was the number?" And you're like, "That wasn't it." I was like, "Okay, we'll leave it on the shelf." But yeah, that was great. The one that you had. I'm guessing that's long gone at this point, right?
Probably. I mean,
or is it gone from your house?
Oh yeah. Yes,
days.
It's been gone from my house. I mean, it lasted about a week after I gave you that sample.
That makes sense. Yeah. It was really good.
But I'm finding that I'm really liking single barrels.
Yep.
For the uniqueness of it, and sometimes you're finding stuff you're like, this is okay.
Yep.
But if you find that one that just hits, your check boxes, you're just like, yes.
Yep.
So, yeah, I have a picture of the label of that one in case I'm ever in
case it ever shows up again.
And I see a special batch of the Westland just to make sure that it's not that one. So
their standard offering sherry cask from Westland is pretty good. I think I have a bottle over there somewhere. It's for being able to find it all the time. It's a pretty good.
I mean,
I'm a fan.
And in fact, I take full credit for you getting that.
Yes, you do.
Just in case you didn't know, his wife reached out to several of Jason's friends. By the way, I'm Chad.
I'm Jason.
Yeah, sorry that we took.
Yep.
Oh, well, we may have to go back and edit this part.
No, this is exactly. You know how sometimes you have shows where you get 5 minutes in, then the credits, like the intro credits start? That's what this is. We're going to be like 15, 20 minutes in, and then they find out who we are.
Okay.
Anyway, it was my birthday.
Yeah, and Jason's wife reached out to several of his friends saying, hey, do you guys know what kind of whiskey he would like? And I was like, I know the exact one he would like. And all the, some of the other guys are like, they were throwing out the traditional, big names.
Yeah.
Get him. And I was like, he's really into sherry casks right now. So this is an American one that's a sherry cask.
And
I bet he'll like it.
The subtext to that was that like a week later, you're like, hey, how was that Westland sherry? I was like, I've been hearing good things about it. And I was like, oh, it was great. You're like, what do you mean it was great? It's like, oh, it's gone now. It was that good. And you're like, I didn't even get to try it yet. So that's why it was offered as a suggestion, because you're like, well, I'm going to be over there at some point.
Yeah, in case you don't realize, Jason and I routinely buy whiskey, and then we routinely share a sample with each other.
If we get to each other in time. Yeah. If it's too good, then it sometimes we don't make it.
There's no obligation, so...
All right, so this is a whiskey and theology podcast, That's right? Because we are in the spirits, walking in the spirit.
Yes, filled with the spirits, right? So we're filled with one spirit now, but in theory, we're also filled with the Holy Spirit.
I'm gonna go back to this one for a second.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, what are we talking about today?
So for those of you that don't know, Jason is a 5-point Calvinist. If you don't know what that means,
if there was 6,
there's a link at the bottom of the description to what.
Oh no, we have to edit that in.
That's right. So
you can Google it.
or as I see them doing podcasts, there's a link right here. So, and I am not necessarily a Calvinist.
Necessarily.
So, Calvin has this acronym, or is an acronym to describe the aspects of Calvinism, right? TULIP.
Mm-hmm.
And so it stands for the total depravity of man, that man is totally depraved and unable to redeem himself because there's nothing good in him. You'll have to help me out here. So U is...
I'll see how far you get it. That's pretty good so far.
Well, I know how to spell tulip, so yeah, it's right there.
Unconditional election.
Thank you.
Yep.
Unconditional election, meaning man has no say whatsoever in his election to the kingdom of God. Is that a fair way to say it?
Yeah. Well, so that God elects people unconditionally, meaning like not on their condition, nothing to do with them, right?
Right.
Yeah. So,
well, right, but it okay. Irresistible grace was I was kind of blending irresistible grace. Yeah. So so U is unconditional election.
Yep.
I is irresistible grace. So unconditional election means you can't be bad enough for God to elect you to His kingdom. Irresistible grace.
You can't be good enough for God to elect you to His kingdom. So it's not on any good that you have done, right?
Okay.
He elects you.
Right.
You can't be good enough or bad enough, right?
Right.
If you could be bad enough, I mean, I guess you are because it's total depravity. But
what I meant was you can't be bad enough for Him not to elect you if He chooses to. That's really
okay.
what I was
That's
getting.
fair.
I just
That's
said
fair.
it backwards. And so irresistible grace is the idea that...
Wait, hold on. We skipped limited atonement. And we don't have TUL.
Oh, yeah, L.
But that's the one that most people don't like.
I was spelling it TUILP.
TULIP.
Yeah, sorry.
It's the French.
So L is limited atonement. So can you express what that
limited
is?
atonement is that Christ died for the elect.
Gotcha.
Right, meaning only
the people in you.
Yes, in the U in TULIP, but yes. So only the people that God has chosen, Christ died for. Yeah. So
okay.
Basically, limited atonement means that the atonement of Christ is limited to those
people.
Those people that He has.
Right, and there's lots of interpretations about what that means. And we're not talking about that. I'm just trying to give you a brief overview.
Yep.
And so then I tried to skip ahead. Mm-hmm. I is irresistible grace.
Yep.
And so that means that in many ways what it means is that if God elects you, you will receive His grace.
Yep. So if God says, "You are my child," you can't resist that. Like if He chooses you, that is an irresistible grace that is shown to you.
Right. And then P, I don't even remember what P is.
Perseverance of the saints.
Okay. So that's the idea that
once saved, always saved, in the Baptist terminology.
Once you've been elected, you are a saint until...
Yep.
A
true believer will never walk away from the faith.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. And so I'm not sure if you guys understand exactly what that means, but... so I've been kind of considering topics for us to talk about. Let's talk real briefly about why we decided to have a podcast. So Jason and I, and his wife and my wife, we regularly is maybe not an appropriate term, but periodically have dinner together. And it seems when we have dinner, we talk about the food and have a good time. And, sometimes we'll have some whiskey. And then inevitably we start talking about theological ideas, right?
Yep. I think that's a natural outcurring of when you have believers together talking about their lives. You don't have to force spiritual conversations. I think they happen naturally, right? And it's not to say that like when you go to dinner and you have a 2-hour dinner that 2 hours of that is just spiritual conversation, but those things naturally come up when we're naturally going to talk about things that we like. We're going to talk about whiskey. We're going to talk about Jesus. So anyway.
Okay. So I was considering a topic that we could talk about similar to how we do at dinner. Mm-hmm. And so recently, our churches merged a couple years ago. And in that process, Jason feels like I am a Calvinist. I just haven't recognized that fact yet. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that all true believers I wouldn't necessarily use the word Calvinist because people don't like that, but I think all true believers hold to TULIP. People are going to hate me for saying this. If you're listening now and you're a 0-point Calvinist, let me tell you, you're just not a Christian, or you are, and you are a 5-point Calvinist. You just don't know it yet. And you can hear, there's more to that conversation, but I hold the stance that yes, all true believers, I think, hold to these 5 points, and they just we see a mystery in different places, right? Because I'm going to end up going down one of these lanes and saying, this is a hard to understand thing. There's some mystery in it. So I'm going to leave this up to God. Right. And a lot of times I think true believers are going to end up getting to that point, but in different areas. Does that make sense? So
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I mean, it's similar to my own journey in a lot of ways over the past 2 years. Mm-hmm. So while I won't say that I can ascribe
to all 5 points,
to the 5 points, I will say that I'm more open to understanding them than I was before.
Yeah.
But that leads me to the idea that so if there is it's what atonement? Unlimited? No. What's the
limited atonement, unconditional election? It is confusing.
Unconditional election. Okay.
Next to each other.
Okay. So, well, here, we can do ULI because they kind of all go together in this idea.
Well, real quick. So I think we're both Southern Baptists, so we probably both agree on the perseverance of the saints, right?
Yep.
So that one's easy.
Yep.
So we're talking about Tulis at this point.
I pretty much see every day the total depravity of man and see that in my own heart, like without God or without Jesus, there's nothing good in me. Yep. Anything good that comes from me is an outpouring from him. So,
yeah, it's the grace of God.
Yeah.
Well, so and my starting point with all of this is that if you believe in total depravity, the others naturally come with that. I don't think you can believe in total depravity and not have the rest of them. I think they all follow each other.
Do what you will with that.
I see where you're going. The thought I had a while back was, okay, well, where is the motivation to live a godly life? In that, if I have no control over it, if he'll take me regardless of how I am, okay, but he's only taking those he's elected. So in other words, if he hasn't elected me, there's nothing I can do about it. And if he has elected me, there's nothing I can do about it. So where is the motivation to live a godly life?
Yeah, I think that's where the irresistible grace comes in. Like, so the reason that God's grace is irresistible to those who are chosen, right? To Christians, right? All Christians, whether they say they are a Calvinist or believe in these points or whatever, they're all elected by Christ. We would have different understandings of what that means, but we're all elected, right? The idea of irresistible grace is that once God reveals himself to you and reveals Christ to you, then that is such a great thing. It's like putting a lollipop in front of a 4-year-old, right? That is like the only thing the 4-year-old cares about now, right? So the motivation to live a godly life is that your desires have now been changed. So you went from a heart of stone to a heart of flesh, right? So I think that's where the motivation comes from.
So you're coming at it similar to what do you remember a while back when I talked about when God said, "Let there be light"?
Yes, and that was around the time we started talking about doing this podcast.
It is.
That might have been the conversation.
And I think that's why I latched on to this idea as a potential topic. Yep. And so what I suggested was, and I was speaking metaphorically because light obviously does not have sentientness, right? But what I said was,
sorry.
I said when God said, "Let there be light," did the light come into existence because God said it, or upon hearing his call, did the light so desire to please him that then it began shining? or make that the earth, right? When he formed the earth, did the earth form because God said form, or upon hearing his call, did the very matter, if the rocks can cry out and say, King of Kings and Lord of Lords, then surely the earth can want to please its maker and coalesce. It's a little bit weird. I'm not trying to suggest that the earth has, power.
Yeah.
But so it's along the lines of what you were just saying. So, that irresistible grace thing is, so I would say you combated my argument by suggesting, someone's godly life is the fruit of their call.
Yeah. So if you go back to total depravity, right? The T, that if our natural desires are not to please God, our natural desires are for ourselves, right? I mean, we see that, and I see that in my life before Christ. I see that in kids who are naturally sinful, right. The same way that we all are.
Yeah, manipulative.
Yes, exactly. There's all the you have kids too. Okay. So if that is our natural desire, so this heart of stone that wants things for ourselves, not for God, then we don't even. So if we want ourselves, we don't want God, which means God has to intervene unless there is something good within us. So I guess that's why I say that if you believe in total depravity,
right,
the other things have to fall to that, because
at least to a certain extent.
So the limited atonement is the only one that I think people. That's the one that people who are down the line with everything else, they're like, don't know about this. So we can get onto that topic if you want. But like you said, there's a lot of varieties of what people believe on limited atonement. Yeah. But irresistible grace is that I don't want anything to do with God. God comes in and he changes my desires, right?
Right.
So now I do want.
So even though you still have free will,
exactly. So that's here. This is the best analogy I've ever heard. I wish I could give credit to where credit is due, but I don't remember. Something I read, the idea of a fish in a fishbowl. So that fish has the free will to do whatever it wants that it's capable of doing in that fishbowl. But that fish is not capable of getting out of that fishbowl. It can't jump out of it, right? But it has free will in that fishbowl. It's just not able to get out. Unless someone comes in, grabs that fish, and takes it out of the fishbowl. Now that fish has the ability to be out of the fishbowl. And it can be thrown in the ocean, and now there's a different set of circumstances that it has to work with. So as a believer, when God, as a chosen believer, when God comes in and changes your heart, then he is changing your desires to enable you to do good works, right? To enable you to follow in the steps of Christ. And your natural desire now, because your desires have been changed, your desire is to do that, right? Now there's still sin in us, right? So we're not 100%
of course.
Effective, so to speak, in that.
And so then I guess, just kind of extrapolating from that. So if you are attempting to live a godly life and your reason for doing that is not to manipulate others, so there's two kinds of people, right? There's the kind of people that are really living it and the kind of people that are pretending it, right?
Yeah, and I think there's a spectrum on that too, because like there's times where we find ourselves as well, like we're trying to please other people, and that's sin coming back in us, right? Like so we can be a true believer and then try to please other people and look like we're doing the right thing, but it's not for the right reason, so therefore not the right thing.
Right. Yep. Yeah, Jason, I know I've mentioned to you multiple times. In fact, I did just earlier that I think the oversimplification of the Sermon on the Mount is your motives are everything.
Yeah. You always say that's the I mean, I think that is the heart of the Sermon on the Mount.
Maybe the heart is the right way to say it, but it's taking this
that's the
big long thing that some people would characterize as like the handbook for how to live a Christian life.
Yep.
And I'm distilling it down to one thing. Your motivation.
We could call this podcast distilling it down if we wanted to. We're not going to.
No, but distilling God's word. No, that'd be no. I like filled.
We'll stick with what we have.
Yeah, fair enough. So, okay, all right. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, no. So I mean, so there's real quick if at this point, if people don't like TULIP and Calvinism, they're probably not listening anymore, unless they just really love Andalusia whiskey. Then they're like, maybe they'll talk about it again. The idea of TULIP, so that came after. So also, if you do like these things, you're gonna tell me I'm wrong on a lot of this because it's been a long time since I've studied this. But TULIP didn't come from Calvin. Calvin had his thoughts and his writings, and then later on there was James Arminius, I think was his name, which is where you get the word
Armenian.
So he came in.
If you hear Armenian, they're not talking about people from the country.
It's Armenian versus Armenia, right? One of them is one, one's the other. Anyway, so he had his thing, which was basically the opposite of that. So TULIP was the I'm going to say a word that you can Google, the remonstrance. I think there was a from John Calvin, who maybe was French. I'm making all of this up. This is all made up. I think that might be true. That was the rebuttal to that, right? Was that no, that is not true. This is, right. A full-blown Arminian is, well, I'm not going to say that, but a full-blown Arminian who sticks to their guns is not a believer. Because you naturally are, which most, I'll add to that, most people that I talk to, almost all of them, who disagree with the 5 points of Calvinism, they get to that point I was saying earlier, where it's like, well, there's a mystery here, right?
Right.
And it ends up in a different place.
It has to do with the interpretation of free will. I mean, I would say that would be where my biggest hang up.
And I think there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of misconceptions on what that is.
It's like anything. Those two views have become caricatured over time.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. Because a lot of times, so what it comes down to is if you say that there is something within me that makes me better than Joe Schmo down the street who doesn't love Jesus, if there's something in me that made me a little bit better that I decided to make a good decision for Jesus, then now that's not Christianity anymore, because that's not Jesus saving you. That's you saving you, right?
Right.
And most people won't say that, right? When you talk about, no, it's not. I'm not better than this other person. I'm not, but there's a mystery there, and I'm okay with that, right? You can still be in fellowship with those, people like that,
right?
With people like that sounds terrible,
right? But, Jason hates everybody that doesn't believe what he believes.
It's true, yeah. So I don't have any friends. My wife doesn't like me either.
Okay, well, you didn't tell her that I was bringing dessert tonight, so she seemed a little verklempt.
I don't know what that word means. I'm going to Google that one too.
It's from I don't know that it's a real word. It's from a Saturday Night Live sketch back in the 90s.
Okay.
Where Mike Myers played, I don't know exactly. I would assume she was a New York Jewish woman by the mannerisms he tried to ascribe, and it was called Coffee Talk.
Okay.
And so when she would get a little
verklempt,
emotional, she'd be like, "I'm verklempt." So
it's like Gleep.
I don't know. Yeah.
So Gleep is not I think it was from. You guys have to Google so many things. We don't have a producer to Google this for us. I think it was from Arthur, the aardvark. The
kids.
Wow!
Hey, what a wonderful kind of day.
Let them work and play.
Yeah.
And rely on each other. And that's not what you're here for. I want to say it was that. It was so it means to steal. You steal something. You Gleep something.
I do remember that.
Was it Arthur?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay, we'll go with that.
Sounds right.
Don't Google it. We're right.
Buddy, his little buddy, I think gleeped something. So
okay. I still use that sometimes. It's like fetch. Make fetch happen from Mean Girls. Fetch is not a real word.
In case you haven't noticed, Jason and I don't come from the same decade.
But we're in the same one now, and that's what counts.
That is true. So we might have slightly different pop culture references.
Or fake words that we use.
Yeah.
Yep.
I never felt so old as the day I tried to do Mr. T in front of my students. I'm a high school teacher, and realized they had no clue who I was talking about.
That's not good. And
I was like, wait, you don't know? I pity the fool. I thought everybody knew that. No,
I get that at work a lot when so I do video production for work, and I was talking about trying to describe a shot for some video we were doing, and I was like, yeah, we need to do the Armageddon shot, right? And so it's like, they're like, what are you talking about?
Wait, from the movie with Bruce Willis?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a shot from people from my generation. They call it the Armageddon shot, and it's the camera gets low to the ground, and then it's slow motion with him slowly walking to you, right?
Okay.
And then my coworker's like, no, is it Right Stuff? I don't know.
The Right Stuff.
It's like, no, that's a Right Stuff shot. I was like, what are you talking about?
That's from 14 years earlier.
I don't have any idea what it is. I don't know. I'm assuming
it's The Right Stuff.
Is it a movie, I'm guessing?
Yes.
Okay.
It's about astronauts.
Is there a slow motion walk?
I don't remember. I may have seen The Right Stuff once. Like, I'm pretty sure when it came out, I was not yet 13.
So it was probably a reference from Armageddon referencing that, but it doesn't,
Right.
I call it not the Right Stuff.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense because in The Right Stuff, they were astronauts, and there was a time where astronauts were heroes, and maybe they still are, but they were big heroes, right?
Yep.
And the Armageddon guys were definitely anti-heroes, right? So
Yep.
so it would make sense that they would do a shot like that to kind of like play off that dynamic.
Well, so anyway, I guess it shows my age, but it
you
happens.
Just didn't realize. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, we're in the same decade now. That's what
Okay.
matters.
All right.
So going back to Tulip, I'm curious. So what is your? I remember early on when we were starting to get to know each other. I think it might have been the second dinner we had, maybe even the first. We were at that ice cream place somewhere. I don't remember where it was. We were having ice cream, and we started talking about Calvinism for whatever reason, and and I think you might be in a. I don't know that you're in a different place now than you were then, but I think you would describe what you believe. Maybe you would articulate it differently. Is that fair?
So I understood the position that, look, you can't claim that you as an individual had anything to do with your salvation.
Yep.
Because claiming that is assuming powers you don't have.
Yep.
If you could save yourself, then
what do we need Jesus
That's
for?
right. What's the purpose of Jesus? So I understood that from that perspective. Okay, I have to be reconciled to the idea that I had no say whatsoever in my salvation. But I couldn't reconcile how my free will wasn't preempted. In that process. I would say since then, I've come to a realization how that can happen. As I described to you, I was studying something for our care group at one point, and in studying that, so I want to say it was January-ish, I came to the realization that, that's when I came up with the whole, when God formed the earth, did the earth form because God told it to, or upon hearing him say form, did it just so want to please him? And so I could see how that applied to me as a person. It wasn't that he forced me to do anything. It's just in seeing his true nature and his call upon me, So
it's like he flipped a switch that wasn't flipped before.
That's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess that kind of points to the irresistible grace thing, is right. Like, or starting with the total depravity, like you said, there's nothing in you. If it's all Jesus, and it's not something like a pilot light in your heart that you just happen to turn up, you know what I mean? Like if it's all Jesus, then if he flips a switch that enables you, now you're using your free will to accept that. Is that kind of what you would say? Or would you go as far as to say irresistibly, you chose that irresistibly because he enabled you to?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately we like to think we had something to do with our salvation. Mm-hmm. And that's the crux, right? That's the challenging part. At the end of the day, that there's no decision I can make that makes me a member of God's kingdom. Mm-hmm. Right? And so I think that's the hard part to get over, especially when you've been taught something so different for so long. I still believe we have free will. I still believe that, that I can do things that are contrary to living for God. Mm-hmm. And it wouldn't change my status before him. That being said, I just don't know that whole mystery aspect. I think I've come a lot closer to the idea that, okay, I'm either elected or I'm not.
Yeah, I agree with that I have no problem saying that we have free will, right? Now, you have to unpack that depending on who you're talking with, right? But again, going to the fishbowl analogy, I think that I have free will to do whatever I'm capable of doing.
Right.
But I don't think I'm capable of because I'm totally depraved, I don't think I'm capable of making a choice for God unless he changes my hearts and my desires. Right. In the same way that Lazarus was dead and Jesus told him to wake up, I think God has done that to his chosen people. And the again, irresistible grace, I irresistibly, I wake up, my heart has turned into a heart of flesh, and now my desires have been changed. So I'm still making free will choices. The only thing that was out of my will was to flip that switch.
Right.
Because I would have never, if I had the ability to, which I didn't, but if I did, I wouldn't ever flip that because I'm totally depraved. I have no desire for God.
So, I mean, obviously, if you really sit and ruminate on it, it becomes easy to see. But coming at it from a different perspective, like probably my chief sin is pride. I would be very quick to sit here and list off all my personal accomplishments.
I have no pride, and I'm very proud of it.
And so it is injurious to my pride to sit here and say nothing I did, because I've grown up believing differently. Mm-hmm. Like, oh no, your salvation happens when you make this decision.
Yep.
And that's, it's tough to get over that I had nothing to do with it. It really is. It's just tough to get over because it's really injurious to my pride to recognize it's humbling. Maybe that's a better way to say it. It's humbling to find out, well, no, that that's the height of arrogance to think that something I did would change my status before God.
Yeah.
And I guess ultimately that's the distinction between Christianity and every other religious action, right? Is the true belief that really there's nothing we can do to change our status before God.
Yeah.
Whereas in every other religious, it is all about what you do to change your status before God.
Yeah. For me, so I grew up in a Southern Baptist home. I think we probably had a very similar upbringing. And I was not familiar with the concept of whether you want to call it Calvinism or Reformed theology, which I hate that term now. But
wait, why do you hate that term?
Oh, that's a whole nother podcast.
All right, but tune into episode 2 for why Jason hates the term Reformed theology. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
But what doctrines of grace? I think that's a great way of putting it, right? I mean, I had never heard of these concepts. TULIP was never a thing for me until college, and a roommate of mine was kind of studying these things. He didn't know what he thought about it. Another roommate of mine, when my other roommate said, "Oh yeah, what do you think about Calvinism, Arminianism, whatever?" And my other roommate was like, "Oh no, Calvinism is terrible," and I was like, "Well, I don't know what those words are. Like, I read Calvin and Hobbes as a kid, but I don't know.
Right?
I don't know who these people are."
Yeah. So we were running a joke earlier that I was going to point out that he's Team Calvin and I'm Team Hobbes.
Yep.
But we decided that was...
I'm the bratty kid who pees everywhere, and you're the tiger. So that comes to life sometimes. Anyway, the point is, a roommate of mine wanted to start studying these things, and I was like, okay, I don't know anybody here. Like, we live together. Sure, let's look into this stuff. And so we started we read a few books, and then we're listening to sermons and stuff. And like, this was a totally new concept to me, right? I had not even heard like my other roommate had about how Calvinism is wrong and bad for whatever reason. I had not heard the term before. I did not know anything.
Oh, gotcha.
So I just thought
sometimes that's really beneficial, though.
Yeah,
you have no prejudice.
Yes, I had. That's very true. I had no prejudice against it. But growing up, when you see the word predestined, growing up in a typical Southern Baptist church in Southeast Texas, where I grew up, it was like, well, predestined means that God looked through the corridors of time, and he saw what you were going to decide, and he's like, yep, I'm going to let that happen. Right? So that's kind of what I thought predestination meant.
Okay.
And then studying with my roommate, I was like, well, I don't know if the Bible says that. I was like, and then so I was slowly turned on to the doctrines of grace. And I remember one day sitting in my tiny little dorm room at my computer reading. I forget exactly what it was. I was reading something, and then a light bulb went off. It clicked, and I was like, "What? And then I dropped an F-bomb, and it was like, this is amazing. I didn't do that, but it blew my mind. Like, it completely blew my mind. And it's like, if this is true, that completely changes my concept of God.
Sure.
Right. And so God is so much bigger now, and my salvation is so much more real to me now. Right. If I was really in a point where I wanted nothing to do with God, and I was looking back and was like, that's probably true, and I had no desire for him, I had nothing good that would make me want to choose him, and he's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to choose you. Like, whoa. And it just completely changed everything for me. So that happened for me in college, and it was probably about a 6 months of studying stuff, and then eventually a light bulb went off, and it just it just blew my mind.
Yeah, so I think, though, you hit on what some folks have a problem with. And it was also another aspect of struggle I had with Calvinism as a whole. Hold on, I got to get some water.
And I'll just keep talking and filling the time. He's back.
Limited atonement. I think that's a real struggle. It was a real struggle for me to consider the concept that, wait, we have a God that loves us and purportedly loves everyone. Yet, by not choosing some people, he doomed those people.
Yep.
And so I think our worldly idea of fairness says that's not fair. Is that a fair?
Yeah. Well, yes.
Okay.
And what I think of at that point is that the people who are not chosen, and God doesn't change their heart, they don't want that, right? Like, I mean, if you look at unbelievers, they have like me before Christ, have no desire for God, right? Like, I don't want anything to do with him. Like, if I asked, a friend of mine who doesn't know Jesus, like, hey, if God could flip the switch, I don't believe in God. Well, hold on. If God could flip a switch to make you believe in him and understand all these things, what do you want to do? Well, no. Forget that. I don't want that. Like, so
right.
It's not like there's people begging to get onto Noah's Ark and they're clawing against the sides and they're like, please let me in. Right. It's like, no, they're like, I don't want anything to do with your big boat.
No,
like, I don't need that.
That's a fair perspective. What I was going for is it's also hubris. Is that the right word? Hubris?
You use big words that I don't understand.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Well,
that was in a movie.
We can have
it's a real word, though.
Our producer that doesn't exist, Google it. Make sure I used it appropriately. It is hubris for us to assume that our idea of fairness is God's idea of fairness. I mean, if I built a little fort out of sticks, what I think about what's fair for that fort is what's fair for that fort.
Yep.
And because I'm the maker.
It's Romans 9, right? Like, who are we as the
what was that ding?
I got an email.
Okay, fair enough.
On the
Keep
computer.
going.
I don't know if that got recorded or not. There was a ding that happened because I got an email on the computer we're recording the audio on, and now we're talking about it. You probably didn't hear it. It's Romans 9, right? The who is the pot to say to the potter?
That's right.
Why'd you form me this way, right? Some are, and that's I like the fort analogy though. Like, what are the rules of the fort? Well, I get to make the rules of the fort. Like
that's right.
Little green army men.
What's fair in the fort is fair because I made it so. But I found myself falling in that same trap. Like, of course, the God that I love wouldn't do that because that's not fair.
Congratulations, you made up your own God.
Right. And so, that's the issue, right? And there are a lot of people that I believe are members of the elect that struggle with that. So
yeah, I think, and limited atonement is the biggest of the TULIP that people struggle with. And I've heard some interesting. I've always thought, until about 6 months ago, I've always thought that there's only two ways of looking at this, and I'll say what those are now, and then I'll get to the third. Either Christ's atonement is limited, or you're a universalist, right? Because either Christ's blood applies to those who will be saved, or it applies to everyone, right?
Oh, yeah.
So
Gotcha.
of course it's limited because we don't
Right.
believe that everybody loves Jesus and
Right.
you know what I mean? Like that's not a thing. So of course it's limited. So then it comes down to is it unlimited? Like he died for everyone, and everyone not meaning. Well, we have to talk about what that means. We'll get back to that in a second. So either Christ died for every
just a reminder,
individual.
This is one podcast.
One podcast.
Yeah,
Okay.
Keep going.
Either Christ died for every single individual, or when it says that he died for the sins of the world, that's referring to Jews and Gentiles. So not just us, meaning not just the Jews, but he died for everyone, right? So when you say that Christ died for the sins of the world, it doesn't mean every single individual. It's that Christ died for his chosen elect, which are from every tribe, tongue, and nation. So
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So
you're
atonement
saying that because his kingdom is representative of the world.
Yes,
you mean it
that
that way.
Yeah. So because the alternative is that he died for every Christ died on the cross, and his blood is sufficient for every single individual, but it doesn't apply to all of them. So he kind of messed up, right? Like,
Oh, so I look at that differently.
so because I think of it as like if Christ died for the whole 100%, but only 50% end up getting used, then now we've got all this wasted space. Like that's weird. It doesn't make sense to me. But that's what I've thought for the past 6 months, until about 6 months ago, and there was another theory that was brought up to me.
So I would say, by the way you described it, is that Christ's blood was finite.
What do you mean?
Like
Unpack that.
There's a fixed number.
I think by the fact that I believe that God has a chosen people, then yes,
Okay.
I think it's finite.
So I
because God knows how many people he's going to change the hearts of, so he dies for that number of people.
Right. But I would say his blood was sufficient for everyone, but wasn't applied to everyone because not everyone was elected.
I mean, okay, yeah, we're probably mincing words, but I could agree with that if what we mean by sufficient is that God can do whatever he wants.
Right. If God had chosen everyone,
then his blood would apply to everyone.
Right. That's what I mean.
I mean, I agree with that.
Well, yeah, I just mean like his blood was sufficient. His death was sufficient to have saved everyone, but not everyone is elected and has received irresistible grace or has been pulled by however you want to say.
No, I agree with that.
Okay. Well,
so we're both 5-point Calvinists at this point. That's what I'm hearing. I don't know if that's true or not.
yeah. Well, for those of you that don't like Calvinists, I'm not going to ascribe to Jason's characterization of me in the hope that you will come back and watch another podcast, in which case we will talk about stuff that is not necessarily germane to Calvinism, but is hopefully germane to Christianity as a whole.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Thank you for listening to us and letting us drink Andalusia.
That's right. I'm Chad.
Oh, and I'm Jason. Yep.
And we'll see you next time, filled with the spirits.
The spirits. Yep.